yes. Yeah. Okay. Oh, hello everyone. This is presentation number 5, Improving Livelihoods and Employment in the Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum online Disability Equality Capacity Building course. And we hope you're all enjoying the varied material that we're putting out for you on the website and coming along on Fridays to one or other of the seminars. So this week's study is really very vital. It's about how we survive our livelihoods and employment. And I'm joined, Richard Reeser, as the General Secretary, by Sarah Kamau, our acting chair, and from a pre-recorded interview with Arman Ali, Executive Director of the NCP-EDP in India, which is our national organisation there. And we'll also be looking at film extracts from various people on employment and livelihood. So without more ado, over to Sarah, who's going to do the introduction.
Thank you, Richard. My name is Sarah Kamau, as you've heard, from Kenya, and I'm the acting chair for Commonwealth Disabled People Forum. And I want to take this opportunity to introduce you to Module 5. And I'll start by saying that disabled people in all countries, especially in low and middle income countries, are likely to be found amongst the poorest. A vicious cycle of barriers of exclusion, isolation, lack of education, training, work, or livelihood reinforcement the disadvantaged position disabled people experience. The loss of livelihood to the individual and to the economies of their countries by the non-engagement of disabled people is both an ongoing human right abuse and economic loss. A sense of achievement is important to all human beings, and we know that with reasonable accommodation and support, disabled employees are productive and effective as anyone and often more reliable than non-disabled employees. Looking at the microfinance and organizations like in cooperatives in agriculture and other self-employed activities, alongside assistive devices, can make all the difference to self-employed disabled people and their families. As we demonstrate, all arguments and barriers that hinder the employment of disabled people can be addressed. The actions to address the current employment gaps and challenges are well known and have been shown to be effective. What is needed is a major renewed effort on behalf of state parties, employers and disabled people organizations, civil societies to implement the commitment already made. As we go along, yes, we talk about the language that the Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum use and why we choose to use disabled people. In the Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum, we call ourselves disabled people because of the development of the social model of disability. In the 19th and 20th century, a disabled person's medical condition was thought to be the root cause of their exclusion from society, an approach now referred to as medical or individual model of ability. We use the social model of disability where the barriers of environment, attitude, organizations are what disable people with impairments and lead to prejudice and discrimination. So to call ourselves persons with disabilities is to accept that we are objects and powerless. We also view ourselves as united by a common oppression and so are proud to identify as disabled people rather than people with disabilities. When you're talking about the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, we will use the phrase people or persons with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay. We seem to be getting some feedback. I don't know where that's coming from. Anyway, I'll carry on. So first part really of this module is to look at livelihoods, which is how people survive really. Disability and poverty are a vicious self-enforcing cycle. As you can see from the diagram here, few employment opportunities, limited education, inadequate healthcare, lack of specialist equipment, lack of safer water and toilets, inadequate shelter, poor nutrition, limited health, low income, poverty leads to many people also developing impairments and staying in poverty. So we call this the disability and poverty vicious cycle. Extreme poverty causes impairments through barriers like lack of access to good nutrition, adequate health care, clean water, through unsafe working conditions. Disability can contribute to poverty through discrimination and additional barriers. Disabled person is likely to have access to rehabilitation, is not very likely to have access to rehabilitation, education, employment, which could help end the cycle. So we have to improve those things. If you're a day worker, for instance, because you don't have a proper job in the informal sector, the likelihood that things are going to be safe or that trade unions have any role for you to control the safety of the workplace means it's less safe, and therefore people in the informal sector are much more likely to have accidents at work, injuries, and work in unhealthy circumstances. So that also reinforces the whole process. Now, I'm going to show you a film on this, which was made by CBM, and I think really brings it to the fore. And here we go.
My name is Khalid.
My name is Alexander.
My name is Abid.
My name is Obada.
My name is Machi.
Hada.
My name is Renee.
Lorenzo.
Winmara.
My name is Bless.
My name is Ekaite Judith Umo. I am one of the 1 billion people with disability in the world right now.
I have the right to lead a full life with equal opportunities.
And live free from discrimination and exclusion.
But having a disability means I'm more likely to live in poverty.
I was left out of school.
I have been left out of employment.
I did not receive the health care and rehabilitation I need.
People think I should not have a family and children.
And
because I live in poverty, I am more likely to obtain a disability.
I didn't have the opportunity to eat nutritious food.
I had an accident, and my family couldn't afford the treatment.
I was injured in the war, and I couldn't access treatment.
I had no access to immunizations or the health care I needed.
So, because I have a disability, I'm more likely to live in poverty.
And because I live in poverty, I'm more likely to have a disability.
It's a persistent, unfair cycle that I and millions of other people are trapped in.
But the cycle of poverty and disability can be broken. If I have the opportunity to contribute to my family and community
without discrimination and regardless of gender.
And if all children with disability have the opportunity to go to school,
And teachers have the training and skills to include all people, then we have the opportunity to end the cycle.
If I am given the chance to work and generate income for my family,
and if I can access the physical and mental health care I need,
then we can end the cycle
of poverty and disability.
I have human rights the same as everyone.
I have the right to defend my interests.
I have the right to be independent in my self-determination.
I have contributions to make.
Imagine how much richer every community will be.
When my skills and talents are contributed, let's end the cycle.
Let's end the cycle.
Let's end the cycle.
Let's end the cycle.
So, and I think what that film shows more than anything else is the indivisibility of the various human rights, that you can't just look at one part of it. It's not something you can study just one part of employment, because it's dependent on education, it's dependent on transportation, on somewhere to live, on self-respect, and so on. So the impact economically of not having this, let's just have figures. So in Bangladesh, reductions in wage earnings attributed to low levels of education amongst disabled people and their children were estimated to cost the economy £54 million a year, and estimates indicate that exclusion of disabled people from the labour market results in a total loss of £891 million every year. Income losses from caregivers, who are, because they're caring for people unpaid usually, is another. So it's more than £1 billion a year that we find there. Or in South Africa, lost earnings averaged $4,798 per person with severe depression or anxiety disorder, totaling 3.6 billion when aggregated to the national level. So these are big losses to the economy, and are a good reason why employers need to think about bringing people into work. However, inclusion could lead to substantial gains. For instance, in Pakistan, it was estimated that rehabilitating people with incurable blindness, as they call it, would lead to a gross aggregate gain in household earnings of 71.8 million every year. In 2000, that's 21 years ago, it was calculated that economic losses from lower productivity amongst disabled people across the low and middle income countries amounted to between 473 and 672 billion pounds a year. At today's prices, and I checked this yesterday on the web, that is 672 to 1,021 billion a year that is being lost to the world economy by us just not being included. So there are really strong financial arguments why we should be there. In addition to that, the state has undertaken to give everyone an adequate standard of living. Now, this is one of the articles that is subject to progressive realization, which means they bring it in as and when they can afford it. But clearly, there are some minimum things that are required. So state parties need to recognize the rights of disabled persons to an adequate standard of living for themselves and their family, and shall take appropriate steps to safeguard and promote the realization of this right without discrimination. They will take appropriate steps to safeguard and promote the realization of that right and to social protection by equal access to clean water, to ensure access to appropriate and affordable services and other devices, access by, in particular, women and girls with disabilities and older persons with disabilities to social protection programs. A social protection program is one that actually gives people a benefit. It gives them food, it gives them medicine, it gives them subsidized shelter, it gives them support and poverty reduction programs. So whatever the level, the base level in the country, and in many countries we've gone backwards from COVID, starting from that base level, the state has to provide additional support. Access by persons to assistance from the state with disability related expenses. So these are the additional costs of being a disabled person. Training, counseling, financial assistance, respite care, just getting the devices that you need, or the adapted clothing, or the adapted diet that you might need because of your impairment. The state should provide some additional support apart from just helping people out of poverty. Access by persons with disabilities to public housing programs. And in many places, those programs don't exist or they're very marginal. One of the ways to get people back into work, including disabled people, is to start mass house building programs as part of the Building Back Better. Clearing the slums with decent housing, with clean water and sewage and protection and electricity would make a huge difference to many millions of people in the world. Equal access to retirement benefits and programs. In most parts of the poorest parts of the world, less than 1% get access to these things. So we can see there is a big commitment from the UN in this area of livelihood, but not that much is actually happening. So actions to end poverty and hunger for design social protection policies and programs to include disabled people, remove barriers that disabled people face in accessing and fully benefiting from social protection measures, sensitize people who are the gatekeepers, the grant officers, the people who allocate these things, to being more aware of our needs, improve access to and accessibility to banking and other financial services, including mobile banking. And we remember from the health module last week that people with Article 12 not being denied legal capacity to have a bank account. That has to change. Everyone is entitled to a bank account. Disaggregate data on poverty and hunger by disability status. Establish national monitoring and evaluation systems that assess social protection. And disabled people strongly believe that only by utilizing the UN Convention as a guide framework in implementing the SDGs will be ensured that exclusion and inequality are not created and perpetrated. And we have been knocked back in the last year. So there has to be redoubled efforts in the next 9 years to get to those sustainable targets. Every government needs to really do something now in 2021 and have a plan to build back better. Sometimes disabled people take the struggle for livelihood into their own hands, and we will see in the seminar a film about this amazing historic struggle, not in the Commonwealth, but in Bolivia, where 125 disabled people sat in for 60 days, then marched over the Andes up 4,500 meters with a truck pulling many of the wheelchairs behind it to get to Murillo Square in La Paz, the center of government, where they met massive police resistance and barriers. The president said they did not need the pension of £56 a week that they wanted for all disabled people, and accused them of being political and trying to bring him down. After a further 3 months of occupation of the area around the government building and 2 deaths and many injuries where a vehicle ran into them, and harsh police treatment, including pepper sprays and water cannon and throwing people out of their wheelchairs. Finally, the president relented and Parliament passed a bill that they would get half of what they'd asked, £28 a month to severely disabled people. They're still fighting now for it for all disabled people. You can see the tactics there in these pictures that they involved, hoisting themselves off a motorway in their wheelchairs and barricading themselves next to the police. So often we have to do these things ourselves, and the bravery and strength of this solidarity of these disabled people is something we all need to learn from. Going on to work, which is really our best way of securing our livelihood. Nobody wants to be living on money that the government is giving them, because it can always be taken away. What we need is secure livelihoods through employment or self-employment. Both SDG 8 and UN CRPD Article 27 both support employment of disabled people. The right to work is an established human right. If you remember back to our second module, there we said the UN Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, the right to work was an established human right. Yet around the world, most disabled people are not in work, with women more significantly affected and impoverished as a result. Historically and now, disabled people and their organizations struggle for the right to work. And we've got 3 pictures there, people in East Africa fighting for the right to work, in India, a whole group of people, including Suruti, who you'll hear in the next film, showing the clenched fist salute, fighting for their rights. And their Work With Me, a campaign in the UK, sponsored by Scope and Virgin Media, because we still have large numbers, even in the developed countries of high income like the UK, where there's a big gap of over 25% between those in employment who are disabled and those in the workforce generally. So this is a global problem, the right to work. Employers, public and private, need to address the following things: negative attitudes and ignorance of the business case for employing disabled people, general lack of awareness and confidence on how to include disabled people in the workplace, inaccessible work premises and work tools, including information communication technologies, inadequate provision of workplace adjustments, reasonable accommodations, a requirement of the convention, lack of support for disabled people to maintain employment and explore career development. So often, governments offer quota jobs for the lowest paid jobs, and there's no progression. People stay on being the post person who takes the post around in a large office, but never any training to do any upgraded jobs. Lack of targeted support for small and medium enterprises regarding employment of disabled people. Many of the largest employers around the world have got the message, the big corporates, that there is a business case for employing disabled people, particularly in the IT sector, as we'll see a bit later on. But the millions of smaller enterprises employing between 5 and 50 people don't think this applies to them, and yet they employ most people, and therefore they're the ones that need to be worked with to change. Governments not implementing the SDGs. Ensure that persons with disabilities are able to exercise their labour and trade union rights on an equal basis with others. If not, we leave ourselves open to modern day slavery, and there are plenty of examples of people with learning difficulties, neurodiverse or mental health issues being abused by employers because of their at-risk status and being paid less than the going rate, or not paid at all, and just being put up in a accommodation and told that they should be thankful for it. And this happens all around the world, modern day slavery. It's happening in the UK, it's happening in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, India, happening all over the world, and we need to challenge it. Disabled people have effective access to general technical and vocational guidance programs, placement and services. You will hear from various speakers. They will say it's education and lack of vocational training that is the key barrier that many people have. Promote employment opportunities and career advancement for persons with disabilities in the labour market, as well as assistance in finding, obtaining and maintaining and returning to employment. And we will hear at the seminar next week from Sri Lanka how they've set up a centre there supported by 700 employers, which is running courses all the time, 24 courses, different courses on software, techniques and so on, and self-esteem to get disabled people into the workforce. We need many more of these centres. Promote opportunities for self-employment, entrepreneurship, the development of cooperatives and the starting of one's own business. And that's where the microfinance comes in. So often disabled people are just excluded from getting funding, even if it's only a few £1,000s to set up a business where they live, chicken farming or improving fish farming, or all sorts of things that disabled people could easily do with a bit of finance capital to build what they need. We also have to promote the employment of persons with disabilities in the private sector through appropriate policies and measures, which may include affirmative action programs, incentives, and other measures such as quotas. We need to be careful with quotas because very often employers will take the least disabled, the least impaired person, get the money from the government, as there's often tax incentives for employing people on the quota. And that means that most of the people with more significant impairments are not accommodated. Ensure reasonable accommodation is provided. We've said that. Promote the acquisition by persons of the skills they need and promote vocational training. And last of all, as I said, provision of slavery or servitude. Okay, so this is a little film from the International Labour Organization, which is a sort of cartoon about how most workplaces can get smart about employing disabled people. So a group of people, disabled and non-disabled, around a table.
What difference can a change make? In the workplace, for people with disabilities, a lot. For instance, Rita has a visual impairment and Amir uses a wheelchair. To tap their full potential, their company has made some simple workplace adjustments. In other words, some smart changes. For employers, being aware of individual differences and receptive to needs is key to improved accommodation for employees with disabilities. And it's not difficult. With a few reasonable adjustments, any company can become a disability smart one. But how did Rita and Amir's company make it work? Well, the supervisors simply asked the question, how can I support you to perform your job better? When Rita was hired, her employer thought a screen reader would make her job easier. But in fact, as she's not blind but has a visual impairment, all she needed was a magnifier. The supervisors consulted with Rita, and now one's been ordered. By using assistive technology, employees with disabilities can perform job tasks just as well as their peers. Amir's company is very happy to have recruited him because he's a highly skilled IT expert. Accessing his company's building wasn't an issue, as his employers had carefully considered floor levels and workspaces. But it wasn't just accessible buildings that were important. Some of Amir's colleagues lacked the skills necessary to interact with him, so communication was sometimes a challenge. After some disability awareness training, and by including Amir in the discussions, teamwork became much more effective. So ultimately, improving business practices for employees with disabilities is the smart thing to do because it leads to improvements for the entire workforce. And that's how you too can become a disability smart company.
Was just 10 when he was first diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy, a rare genetic disorder that has a crippling effect on his whole body. It means he needs help from others for all of his daily activities. But despite his condition, Khan founded a garment factory in Delhi's Madhepur district. It took him 3 years to set up the business and to establish trust with his clients.
They had some hesitation in working with me, but I was confident. Others were not. To win their confidence was the biggest challenge.
But then there was another challenge. The COVID-19 pandemic led to a nationwide lockdown. The local market where Khan sells his wares shut down. And even now the lockdown has been lifted, business has failed to pick back up. People with disabilities are among the worst hit as a result of the virus in India. Many have lost their livelihoods and face financial difficulty, particularly those working in the informal sector, according to a study by an Indian disability rights organization.
You're talking of a situation where everybody's impacted, right? And people with disabilities will just be that much more impacted, almost 3 times as much. Women with disabilities will perhaps be even worse. Without data and without intent and without political will, it's going to be a conversation that ends here.
Most of Khan's workers have not returned, and he was forced to sell off half the machines in his factory. Khan fears a second wave of the virus could mean the complete breakdown of his business.
We risk our lives doing business, but I can't sit around doing nothing for a very long time. I have to work to fulfill my financial needs.
The garment factory was a means for economic self-reliance for Khan. He wanted to employ and support people like him. But today, and for the foreseeable future, the factory will remain empty.
Okay, so we can see there that the impact of this has a big impact, COVID, on people who even made the effort to do employment. He's a small employer himself, and I'm sure in a few years he'll be back there with his own factory going again. But you know what was important there, the key thing for him was his self-confidence. So over now to Sarah to give us a more detailed case study of a larger company in Kenya, Safaricom. Sarah?
Yeah, I want to talk about a case study in Kenya, a company, very high-tech. It's a leading corporate in information and communication technology in Kenya. It played a very key role during the Global Disability Summit and committed to accelerate employment of people with disabilities. It also chairs the Forum for Global Disability Summit and is a member of the Kenya Business and Disability Network. It has signed the Disability Charter for Change and partners with government and private sector to ensure persons with disability get employed at all levels, even beyond the threshold that the government has recommended, at least 5%. So Safaricom has been involved in rehabilitating its environment to accommodate the needs of the persons with disability at its workplace, which it has employed. It has assisted disabled people acquire assistive devices, technologies like mobile phones. It is the one charged with the mandate of mobile phones in the country. And it has made those phones disability friendly and has even given persons with disabilities opportunities to have shops opened where they can sell the phones and even transact money through mobile phones for economic empowerment. Some time back, in partnership with Ayud Kenya, an international youth movement, Safaricom distributed over to 20,000 white canes to blind people across the 47 counties in Kenya. It has a foundation, a Safaricom Foundation, which has also been involved in distributing assistive devices to more than 5,000 children with visual impairment across over 5 schools in the country. Safaricom also has shops, kiosks provided, have given disabled people businesses which have become like alternative livelihoods for persons with disabilities. It is a business venture. It offers business opportunities for persons with disabilities, as well as even employing them at their workplace. So the commitment that it has signed obligates the company to assist in eliminating stigma and discrimination of persons with disabilities. Gives them economic empowerment, and it also has allowed or committed to accessibility and affordability of assistive devices and technology that it helps persons with disability to achieve. At the moment, 2.1% of its staff are disabled people, and it aims to reach maybe 12.9 by 2021, which is a good threshold compared to other companies in this country. Safaricom is a listed Kenyan mobile network operator, with its headquarters in Nairobi. It is the largest telecommunication provider in Kenya and one of the most.
Should we go ahead with the film?
So yeah, you can go ahead now and play the film about the employing persons with disabilities at the workplace.
Hi, my name is Miriam. I work at Safaricom call center. Welcome as we explore my workspace.
My name is Elizabeth Musomi. I work at the Safaricom retail shop I&M.
I believe our ethos at Safaricom is staying above the curve in all we
we do, whether it's corporate sustainability, whether it's profitability, whether it's corporate governance. We believe in doing more than what has been stipulated either by law or by any other organization.
The business made enough effort to guarantee that persons with disabilities get a lifeline opportunity through career.
We are committed to be an equal opportunity employer, and we would want to bring on board even those people who are considered to be either physically disabled for whatever reason. We want them to be part of our ecosystem, we want them to be part of our employees, and we want to give them all the tools that are necessary to make them achieve their potential.
And we're working towards that through different strategies. One that's very important is around attracting them. Secondly, around developing the right environment, both physically and even our fellow employees, for them to be able to accept these people as we are one, and also retention programs for the same group of people.
I've been working for Safaricom for the last 3 years, and it has been great. It's very easy to work in Safaricom. They make sure that we, as a person with disabilities here, we are very comfortable. We have lifts for us persons with disabilities. We have got lamps, even the washrooms. They are so much conducive for us, even for like those people in wheelchairs, yeah, and on crutches. It's so spacious. Safaricom is a good place to work and grow professionally.
I must say that there's nothing that stops us from having an environment that is fully inclusive. It's not money that stops us, because it's not a money discussion. It's around having a fully inclusive environment. The facilities that we all benefit from, for example, the gym, we ensure that the gym workout equipment is suitable for people that are differently enabled. So there's quite a bit that we've done internally.
For the time I've been in Safaricom, it's been beautiful, especially on work-life balance. As you can see, I'm able to do my training at the same time, report to work.
Our journey in Safaricom started way back, but we are accelerating that journey this year, where we have now decided to focus on matters of disability.
At the end of the last financial year, we had about 1.2% of our employees as people who are differently enabled. And we've now increasingly want to become aggressive and have set a target of 5% of our total workforce to be people that are differently enabled.
And therefore, we at the moment have employed 65 persons who are differently abled, 8 of which are on contract basis, and we continue to onboard people so that we surpass the target being advocated by the government. We continue to put in systems and mechanisms to support persons with disability. For example, in our shops, we have made sure that 2 people in every shop can sign language to take care of persons who have hearing impairment.
Every day I find passion in my work by assisting customers who are differently abled. For me, I believe all customers deserve to be served and delighted in a professional manner.
I'd like to encourage my fellow human resource practitioners to apply strategies and include them in their working environment, because they're part of society. If they don't come to work, where would they go?
Each of us has unique talents, and each corporate will find each of these talents very, very important to them. And we just want them to come on board so that we can push this particular agenda together.
I'd like to thank Safaricom at large for giving me this opportunity, for giving me a chance to work, transforming my life, making me a better person. As you can see, I've really grown to be a better person, and I really enjoy working at Safaricom.
We feel gifted, privileged, and for the company especially to come with a nice surrounding gym environment for us to be able to balance.
So, thank you. Very impressive. Now, there's another initiative you're going to tell us about, Sarah. Tell us about In Business.
Yeah, we're going to talk about another project called In Business project in Kenya. This is a project, the first stage of which has now been completed and will provide support to around 100 micro and small businesses owned by persons with disabilities. The small project is testing the best ways to provide training and expertise to help business owners become sustainable. They receive coaching from more experienced peers on business development services, such as record keeping, stock management, and supply chains. Some of the businesses are owned by refugee in camps. I would say like the United Disabled Persons of Kenya organization, which I am a board member, is a part of this project in Kenya. And Light for the World is the lead in the project. And what our task is to find the DPOs that need training and refer them to Light for the World so that they can do the training, the business skills, the writing skills, developing marketing plans, customer service, bookkeeping, soft skills, communication skills, so that at the end of the day, they are able to do their businesses and be able to keep their books properly. I'd also like to add the point that the findings from the first stage also of the in-business project are already being applied to further work with micro businesses owned by people with disabilities affected by COVID-19, both within and outside the project, including how the use of mobile cash transactions can reduce infection transmission by removing direct cash payments. So this is a good program in Kenya, which is helping persons with disabilities to be able to do business the right way. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Some really exciting things happening there in Kenya. The most populous part of the Commonwealth is India. Let's see what's happening there. There are estimated 70 million disabled people in India, a gross underestimation. People put the figure as at nearer to 200 million, of whom only about 0.1% are employed currently. The International Labour Organization back in 10 years ago reported that 73% of disabled people in India are still outside the labour force. And there's a huge issue there, which causes many working age people not to be engaged. The Indian government, under the influence of the convention, did introduce the 2016 Act, requires each establishment to publish an equal opportunities policy for persons with disability or disabled people. The EOP must contain details regarding amenities and facilities, list of posts identified for such persons, and details of training. This is not just for government, this is for all posts. So it has the potential to really shift things in the Indian government, because up until now, it's been mainly government jobs on a quota system that have been there for people. A 2017 study of information technology sector found 147 interviewed who had physical access issues within the workplaces, and they highlighted a concern of 95% of them. They perceived their communication attitudes of people and discrimination and harassment were still critical barriers. So to find out more about this, I went and interviewed Arman Ali, who is the Chief Executive of the National Centre for the Promotion of Employment of Disabled People. And let's hear what Arman has to say. And I may have to cut this a little bit.
How has COVID affected that? Hi, Richard. Thank you for having me with you today. As Richard introduced, my name is Arman Ali. I'm the Executive Director of National Centre for Promotion of Employment for Disabled People, NCPEDP. We are a non-profit organization and which is focuses on research-based advocacy. We are not into directly providing employment to disabled people, or nor are we involved in any sort of training of employment for people with disability. Now that brings me to the question on what is the position of disabled people in India as regard to employment and self-employment. I think the position of disabled people in India with employment is not a very bright picture. And one, because we are still not able to break the glass ceiling. Number one, the biggest problem is that huge rate of illiteracy among disabled people. Even if somebody wants to look for people with disability to be employees of their organization, it is difficult to find the kind of skill set one is looking for. So everybody is aware that now that more than 70% of children with disability drop out of school, and very few could make out to the higher education. So that's one reason where you don't find people who are literate for all kind of jobs. So there are only certain kind of jobs which people with disability are doing. If you look at, for primarily they look at government, which has a reservation of 4% under the present Right of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016, which is against identified jobs in various government departments. And again, it mostly under the C and D category, the blue collar jobs which are there, and other competitive exam people with disability are not able to make to most of them. But there is also a change in terms of perspective. People are becoming aware, they are preparing, but it is again limited to broad three categories of disability, which is blind, people with or locomotor disability, people with hearing impairment, and other disability do get sidelined. There is a need to create a lot of awareness about those, and people have to assert this right. That's another topic altogether. Self-employment is very unorganized and yet to be promoted, promoted amongst disabled people themselves and also by the society at large. What I personally believe that a lot of people with disability who are based out of peri-urban and rural areas are engaged in some kind of informal sector for livelihoods. But these are not recorded. There's no data around it. So the people do engage in small trades in wherever they are. But again, it is limited to the three broad categories of disability amongst the employers. Those who also want to employ wants to keep it to the milder disability, and which is more for them to understand that they are not going to cause any hazard in the office. So there is an opportunity, but both ways, I think. Disabled people also, they look at the government first for getting an employment, and then they consider a private sector job. And private sector jobs are limited to large corporations who are equal opportunity employers, are in big cities. So it doesn't work for smaller cities or smaller towns in the country. So there are 4 or 5 big cities, metro cities in the country, which has multinational companies or large corporations, which has a record of employment opportunity policy, which takes on people with disability as employers is the opportunity. This needs to break down and need to get to the smaller cities, and the regional commerce business houses need to recognize this need and incorporate equal opportunity policies in times to come. There is a scheme with the government which says that the government will pay the provident fund for the employees with disability in a corporation, but it has not taken off to the true sense of it. Now, the new law which was passed 4 or 5 years back, say the RPWD Act, the Rights of Persons with Disability Act, it talks about equal opportunity policy for every establishment with more than 20 employees and have to register with the Commission on Disabilities Office in their respective state. And the law talks about reasonable accommodation. It is for the first time that the law is talking about reasonable accommodation. The law talks about creating barrier-free infrastructure, even if you are a private, privately owned, but it's a public place. So I think these are laws, these laws are there which kind of protects the rights of disabled people. But again, the implementation of this is very poor. The understanding of these laws, awareness about these laws are very poor, and it remains a piece of paper as I speak.
Okay, I'm going to leave Arman there. You will be able to watch the full interview on the website, but those are the main points. Now over to getting employers to take this. Another country, the South Africa, the Human Rights Commission has provided a really good booklet of advice to employers, and they put forward the don'ts and do's for employing more disabled people. So don't assume disabled people are unemployable. Do learn where to contact and recruit disabled people. Don't assume disabled people lack the necessary education. Learn how to communicate with them. Don't assume disabled people do not want to work. Do ensure that your application and other company forms ask for disability-related questions. Don't ask if a person has a disability during an employment interview. Do consider having written job descriptions and identify the essential function of the job. So often people are given other things to do that are not essential, which then prevent them from doing the job. Don't assume that certain jobs are more suited to disabled people. Do ensure the requirement for medical examinations do not discriminate. Don't assume that disabled people can't do a certain job. Do provide reasonable accommodation. Now, obviously, there are certain jobs people can't do, like you wouldn't employ a blind person to be a driver. But I've seen positions where a blind peripatetic teacher wasn't allowed to be a peripatetic teacher because they couldn't drive themselves around. Now, the reasonable adjustment would have been to actually provide them with a driver. Don't assume your current management will need special training. Do treat disabled people the same way you would treat everyone else. And so it goes on. A very useful guide that I would urge people to have a look at. There are a couple of issues I want to deal with before we finish. Special employment measures. In mostly developed countries, there are special employment schemes targeting disabled people. These include workshops, often called sheltered workshops, which provide very basic manual work, often without salary or at a much lower level. And there have been trade unions built there, and over the last 100 years have gone on strike and fought for them. Companies where the majority of staff are disabled, who pay market wages and provide jobs which are not different from those available in the labour market, but they're segregated workshops. UNCOPID argues against these things and says disabled people should be supported with reasonable adjustments to be in the open market. If sheltered workshops are to be shut, must be planned transition to jobs with regular employers, not just shut as the UK government did a few years ago, where they shut Remploy, and most of the 5,000 disabled workers who were made redundant have not yet had jobs. So that was not the right way to do it. They were trade unionized, and they need to be in the past, and still some trade unions have fulfilled a narrow role of protecting jobs and not really provided work for everybody and support for everyone. These days, trade unions use their collective strength to fight for equality and equal rights more and more. This can include organizing women to get equal conditions and pay, fight racism, and stop divisions in the working class, and organizing all forms of workers. And that's what more progressive unions are doing around the world. They recognize that having certain groups of workers who they look after and others not gives the employer a wedge to drive into them, and they have decided that solidarity is the best thing. And a good example of that is the British trade union movement, who used to be very bad on it, but over the last 40 years have changed, championing disabled people in the workplace, actually appointing disabled champions, which employers give some time off work for them because they realize that it helps them to employ more disabled people, which means that they have an image out there in the community that they're a good employer. People will buy their products and services. And then the law changes. So we've had the Discrimination Act in '95 and the Equality Act in 2010 in the UK, gives legally enforceable duties on employers not to discriminate, and many thousands of cases taken to employment tribunal, which has established case law, which really is very strong now. Trade unions have set up consultative structures and even has a place on the General Council for a disabled member. So this can be done, and I would urge people to talk from DPOs with the trade unions to start them doing this work, because they need to get in line with what the ILO are saying to trade unions around the world. They need to become equal opportunity champions and employers themselves. So over to you to finish us off now. Very brief on this one, Sarah. So what should the states do as a result of what we found out through this presentation?
Yeah, the states are supposed to ensure that national legislations are in place and are implemented and executed. The public sector should lead by example by hiring disabled people. The state should provide financial incentives to employers and workers to hire disabled people. State should make available advice on good practice and adaptive technology. They should also, in public procurement policies and systems, should include provisions that encourage disabled people to tender or apply for procurement jobs. Where there are quotas, states should ensure implementation of those quotas when it comes to work, when it comes to employment. States should support entrepreneurship and microfinance so as to enable disabled people to get finance and resources to do business. Job retention and return for those who acquire an impairment should be assured by the state. Support disabled people in sheltered employment to benefit and enter the mainstream labor market. The state should also encourage employment in private sector with employers by giving them incentives that, like we said before, the mainstreaming technical vocational education and training, TVETs, systems and programs to include disabled people, ensure disaggregated data is available for planning purposes and even giving the necessary services to those who deserve them. The states should put in place a robust monitoring and evaluation on targets that have been set and achieved very seriously, so that it is known what they have planned and what they have achieved. And finally, and not last, but intersectionality and non-discrimination of minorities into the schemes. Let there be no discrimination, that minorities who happen to be disabled people are brought on board when it comes to work and employment as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And to end, a thought. If every employer took on employing disabled people, they would improve their profile. Disabled employees have been shown to be very assiduous at turning up and doing their job, highly productive when they've got the right adjustments. Their public profile, as we saw from Safaricom, really improves their market position, and it also improves things for the government, because of course then there is a wider tax base of people actually earning money that can be taxed and pay for services. So it's a win-win situation, and we really have to kickstart all of our countries to make sure that this happens. And I hope what we've given you today will help you with that. Thank you very much.